Of what?
All good.
Of Brazilian humor, because I'm like, give a better example, but no, they're just as silly. They're just as stupid. Anyway, let's start.
Yeah. All right, guys. So today we're going to talk about a few different things in lighting: Rembrandt lighting, Chiaroscuro lighting. I think that's how you pronounce it. Motivated lighting, and then decibels and levels for recording audio. So I'm going to share my screen again. First thing we're talking about is the Rembrandt lighting. And Rembrandt lighting is a style that's used in a bunch of photography. It's also starting to become more prominent in a lot of films. You'll see it in a lot of scenes, especially close-ups and things like that. It's basically characterized by light hitting one side of the face. And because of the nose and the way the nose is shaped, it casts a shadow on part of the face, which ends up making, like in this picture, a kind of like an upside down triangle, an inverted triangle underneath one side of the person's face, underneath their eye. On one side of the person's face, underneath their eye. That's what I mean.
And what's that called?
Rembrandt. It's like a guy a famous painter back in like I think it's when was it, honey? Like the Renaissance, I think.
No. Rembrandt was not the Renaissance. The Renaissance was Chiaroscuro. The Rembrandt, I believe, was before that. Let me look it up. Because we don't want to get stuck.
He was a famous painter that like really stylized this lighting. With some of his paintings, he started doing this where one side of the face was darker. Back in that time, there was like a lot of these paintings where very bright. The whole picture would be in high key lighting, like everything's lit up and everything's seen. And he started painting
1628 or 1629.
Okay, so I don't know.
So the late 1620s.
Gotcha. All right, so around that time, they were doing these paintings that were like, very bright and colorful and everything. And he started his own style, which was where he would leave some parts of the person's face in the shadow, or some parts of the image in the shadow, which would cause this little triangle of light to appear on somebody's cheek, kind of like in photography now we do it the same thing. It has like a little triangle, upside down triangle right under their eye. To be more authentic to how he used to do it, usually the triangle is no wider than the eye and no longer than the nose. But, because it's an art thing, you can always change it and adjust it to however you want it to be. You can make the shadows be brighter or darker, softer, more harsh. You usually get this look by using a more harsh light. So it's not as soft on one side of the face, and that will cast that shadow and make that really steep drop off in light on the certain parts of the person's face, like in this photo right here, where you can't really see the left side, screen left, her right side. Can't really see that. It kind of blends into the shadow, but you can see the rest of her face, and it kind of gives us that depth and that dimensional look. So this is used a lot in filmmaking whenever they want to show like they want to set a mood for the scene. And they usually shoot it from the shadowed side. So you can see like right here, the camera taking the photo is actually on the side with her shadow. If it was on the other side, it would be a little less noticeable with all the depth, because we could see her whole face, and then all of a sudden it would just drop off into shadow. So usually what they do is shoot it on the shadowed side so you can see the depth and you can see the different layers within the photo itself.
So just as a correction, I was looking up, I think it is probably during the Renaissance, because the Renaissance was all the way from the 14th century to the 17th century. So it was probably part of it, because 1620s. And I will say, like, at first I was like, what? Once you notice it, you can never not notice it. It's insane. Like, it's in everything. And your brain just makes that triangle in your head every time after you notice it once. It's pretty crazy.
Movies with Rembrandt.
Because at first I was like, I don't see it. And then when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's in everything.
And you can see like some of them have darker shadows. Some of them, it's not really as noticeable. It's kind of like, well, there's light. So it's not completely like the Rembrandt style where everything else is in a lot darker of a shadow than just the little triangle of light. But you can see it in a lot of different films. They show like if they walk into a light or if a light's shining on them, they have this little triangle that's a little more prominent than that shadow that's right next to the nose, like
That
in
makes
this
sense.
photo right here.
What
believe,
what,
go
what
ahead.
would the triangle be for?
It's just it's not really, it's just what happens when you use this style of lighting. It has like a triangle of light underneath their nose.
So the
It's not
triangle is just
necessarily about the triangle as much as it's just about the way it looks, and people like the
Yeah, it
look of
was.
it.
it's about
It
the
also
light.
has to do with the.
Oh, go ahead.
It also had to do with the light, coming from different directions, and it creates a kind of triangle around the nose area.
Mhm.
And that was something which Rembrandt had noticed in his painting, because Rembrandt does mostly like the different shades of color.
Mhm.
And he expressed shadows and the gradient of different shades in his paintings. And I think that's where this thing came from, the Rembrandt type of expressionism or something. I don't know. I think is that the duration? Is that the time period that they call it?
Sorry,
as
what? You're kind of muffled.
expressionism?
Say it again.
The time period, isn't it called as expressionism, something like that?
Yeah, I was gonna
I
say
think so,
like
yeah.
I think it is, like I was telling Coda, I don't think it's Renaissance. I think it was called something else, because I did hear it called expressionism a lot in school and stuff. But they're saying that the Renaissance lasted all the way from the 14th to the 17th century. So I'm like, oh, maybe it was around that time, but maybe it just was a different style.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things are happening around that time. So it doesn't mean, just because it was around that time doesn't mean necessarily it was the same thing, part of it. But from what I've noticed with this style, it just seems it's not about the triangle itself. It's more about the shape, what the shadows do, the feeling that it gives you, the shapes that it creates. Because remember, guys, last semester we learned about shapes and how they can be used to guide our eyes and to make us feel certain emotions and to capture certain capture certain things. So yeah, so I feel like that's what it's more about than just, oh yeah, there's a cool triangle thing. Like it's more about the emotion that it gives and
Right.
what the shapes can do and what
Right.
they
The
make.
main thing is about adding depth to the image and making it not just look flat and boring. That's the main thing in this kind of style. It's to have those shadows to kind of enhance or showcase the light, or have something be in mystery, or have it seem dark. Horror movies use it a lot for scare tactics and jump scares and stuff like that. A more suspenseful or thriller movie might use it so that it's more mysterious. You don't know who's standing there, as much as you would if you saw them in full light. So it kind of gives the person's face a little bit more depth and a little bit more layer, instead of
And
just
like
having.
Sarah, sorry, and like Sarah's saying in the comments, it helps with the story. It helps get you into the emotion of the scene, what you're supposed to feel, the tone and the vibe and that kind of thing.
So the reason why a lot of people like this style is because first of all, it's easy to set up. You can do it with one light. You can do it with one light and a reflector. You just have the one light be the key light on whichever side of the face it's lighting up fully. And the other side of the face will be in shadow. So you do a little bit of reflection, or you move the light around until you get it to have that little triangle underneath the other side of their face. So the rest of them are in shadow, but one side of them is all in the light. And then you can choose which side of the camera they're facing. Like in that photo I was just on, the bright side of his face was facing the camera, but in like our camera's more seeing this than they are seeing that, because we're coming at it from this angle, instead of it being something like this, which we're seeing it more from the shadowed side. So you can adjust it and change it around to how you like it. And it doesn't have to be like a complete triangle. That's just like the starting point pretty much for like how to get that look. And the reason it's there is just because it looks a little more natural to us. If the sun were outside shining, it would be shining on one side of their face. And if they turn around to the sun and the sun's only facing one side of their face, because the way our nose is shaped, it's going to cause that shadow, and it's going to cause that little bit of light to hit our cheekbone, but not hit right beside our nose and underneath where our jaw is, like this line of shadow you see right here. So that's the reason why a lot of people like it. It's a style, and it's you know, a little bit more natural looking than
And it's just one light, so you only need one light, and it's shining there, and you want the shadows for.
right. And if you only have one light, it's going to have the other side of their face be a lot darker most of the time.
Like this
But there
picture
will
here.
be a little bit of light hitting that.
And I
that
was going to say
cheekbone.
the most common style is actually one light plus a diffuser on the other end, just to help
a reflector,
balance
not a
it.
diffuser.
Yeah, sorry, a reflector on the other end. I'm still learning the terms. That's something I'm still having trouble with. But yeah, on the other end to help balance it out and to help give more depth as well.
But you can see it's like not completely a triangle. It doesn't have to be completely pointing down. It's just explaining like that. If you look at that side of his face, it looks kind of like a triangle. If you draw it, it doesn't exactly fit perfectly, but it's mostly showing you what that style is and what it means. So this is what we're talking about. It would be like a key light on either the left or right side and casting that light on his face or their face. So like the key light would be coming from his right, our screen left, and then the reflector or no reflector. I don't know. I think they're probably not using a reflector right here, but that would be casting the light back into his face if they were using it. Something like this, I'd say they're probably using this, but the light is coming from the left, and then there's nothing on the other side, so it's just casting some light on his cheek.
I really like that photo, and it seems like now that I'm starting to like doing lighting and stuff, that actually wouldn't be that hard to do.
Right, and it's if you look up actors and their photos, a lot of them have a headshot that has at least one that has this technique used in at least one of their photos. And a lot of people say that you can use it like that. But that's kind of it. Like this is a lot softer look. The light's wrapping around her a lot more, but you can still see that the brightness, and it kind of creates that triangle on her right cheekbone. And the rest is in shadow, but we can still see a lot more than we could in the other photo. So then you have a lot more to mess around with to see like how much you want to hide and how much you want in the shadow and all of that based on the story, you know, because we're doing narrative filmmaking and stuff like that. So we want it to be based on what the story and the emotion of the scene is, not just because it looks cool. So always keep that in mind. Like Sarah was saying, it's all about the story. But a lot of scenes require, you know, some kind of drama or thrills or horror, and these kinds of looks are really good to kind of mess around with to see if you want that for your scene.
Well, I'm thinking and going further with like all about being the story and stuff, all about the story. But then the more, if you have the story well defined, and then you can add in, you know, gritty shots or beautiful shots like that just help sell the scene even more. It actually
to sell the scene and give purpose, because there is nothing worse. I don't know about most people, but in my personal opinion, there is nothing more frustrating, nothing more annoying for me than watching a movie where there's a bunch of like really cool looking shots, and it gets me thinking like, oh, why did they choose this shot? Or, oh, is this supposed to make us feel something? And, or, you know, because it makes you feel an emotion. It makes you think that something's happening. And then, nope, it's just to look cool. And it's wasted. And there's no purpose for it. There's no reason for it. There's no structure to it. There's no flow to this story. It's just a bunch of one cool shot after the other. None of them connect. None of them help the story along. Sometimes they even confuse you more, and they end up looking worse, because we were watching a show and they had like a bunch of cool shots, but I was like, it's super distracting. It has nothing to do with the story. I was like, why are they doing this blur all the time? Every single time they're doing this rack focus thing. They did it like 4 times in one scene after the other.
Use like the skills and practice them. If it's like, this is just like a show reel of practicing my skills, and you're like, it's not.
Yeah, but I'm talking about a film needs to have like every shot, every lighting choice, they need to have purpose, and they need to help further the story or deepen the emotion. Don't do it just to look cool, people. Please.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a good story, then you make that story look cool. And I like that. You enhance the story. You make the story beautiful or gritty or creepy or whatever it is you're going for. And then go and add in all the effects and all the beauty and awesome shots, or keep it simple, mixed with a couple things or whatever.
Yeah.
But when the story's really good and the acting's great and the actor's great, and then you make her look beautiful or gritty or him, same thing. It just makes the story even more compelling. It's like you have this beautiful cake mix. You cook the cake and then you ice it, and it's beautiful and tasty, delicious. And
Okay, stop, Sarah. I'm making dinner. Stop making me think about dessert.
Sounds too good. All
We're
right,
looking
yeah.
fine cake at Walmart today. Okay, I'm sad. Now let's
So
keep
yeah, the
going.
main thing is V said, So the main thing is, yeah, you wanna make sure that the icing complements that cake, and that you're not using some kind of icing that's gonna taste good on its own, but doesn't taste good with the cake. Cake is the story, icing is the cinematography and lighting, which goes into cinematography. So there you go. That's the summarized version of it. So we're not all thinking about cake. So to achieve this lighting though, you can put, a lot of people say they usually put their key light around 45 degrees away from the camera. So not coming in at the subject from a 90-degree angle, but more like how this key light showed. It's about 45 degrees off axis from where the camera is, shining light on that person. And then the reflector or the second light or whatever, or if you're not using another light, but if you're using a reflector or a fill light, then you would put it around the same distance away, 45 degrees on the other side of the camera, just like this photo shows. They also say you want to raise the light up a bit, usually. I mean, this all depends on how you want it to look, but for the look that they're going for, a lot of these looks, they're saying that they're putting the light 45 degrees to the left of the camera or to the right of the camera, and then they're putting it about 45 degrees up in the air. So it's kind of coming in at an angle and at an angle away from the camera. So that way you get that nice look right on their face, but it's coming from above. So it's casting those natural shadows that we see when we go outside, instead of the light coming from directly in front of them or directly below them, which is going to make it look, the shadow is going to look very different. And you're not going to get this triangle on that cheek, which is what this lighting is known for. That Rembrandt triangle is what they call it. So does anyone have any questions or comments about that? All right, I'm going to continue on. So now we're going to go to this.
I was going to say also, if anyone wants to add anything that you know that we didn't cover, remember this is a study group. So like we're learning together and talking about subjects together. So if there's anything you know that we don't, or that we got, or that you'd like to correct us, or like, oh, different opinions, like feel free, you know, like, because we're learning as well and we don't know everything. And sorry, I used like 4 times. But yeah, so
I like that. Appreciate you all. You guys rock and kick ass.
Thank you. You too, everyone. And thanks for Vish adding in his insight into it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, exactly. Like we like hearing everyone's different opinion. If someone's like, I don't really like that, like we can have a discussion about it. It's cool. But anyway.
And it just
that's why I say questions or comments. If someone has a question that I'm able to answer, I'll try to help. Or if not, I'll try to ask somebody that knows.
And there's also
comments that's like something you know that I did left out, or you think it's not as good, or something like that.
And there's also the case of like not every style might work for you. Like Coda has his preferences on what styles he likes. I'm sure other people have their style of lighting that they prefer, or cinematography that they prefer.
You just look at any director, you'll see the super differences that they all have and how they go about the lights and all of that.
So it's okay to like,
cinematographers.
I don't know if that's my favorite. For example, some people like really dreamy cinematography, really dreamy, like blurry, like very soft lighting and that kind of thing. Not everyone likes that. And some people more like dark, brooding, edgy, like a little bit like this. So it's okay if you.
I would say it kind of depends on the scene in that instance.
Yeah,
dreamy is good for anything if it's supposed to be like happy or kind of like,
well, you know what I mean,
or
like
not really dramatic. But if you're going for a drama,
you can make a dramatic dream-looking sequence as well.
Yeah,
no, it's true.
I've seen a few.
It's just not gonna.
Fine,
You
maybe
can,
I
yeah,
didn't do
okay.
the
I'll
best
say you can.
example.
You can. You're right. I
No,
would
but I'm
just
saying,
like I
like,
would
maybe I gave
recommend,
a
you
bad
know,
example,
really
but you
paying
know what I
attention to
mean.
how it's going to affect that story.
Yeah,
I know
Because
what it-
like we're learning this lighting style, you can see in these pictures, they're all very different. You can see that blue one is a little bit softer. It's a little bit more blurred. It's a little bit
yeah,
more
you
dreamy,
give
like
better
she's saying.
examples. I suck at examples.
Yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, adding in there, and sometimes you have to be like, a boundary might be in place, or they might be like, I don't like this today, and then like because it's still like there might be something behind it, and then they might go in a couple weeks, actually no, I'm fine now. Now I like that. There was just something I was having a block. So with acting, sometimes you'll come up with sometimes you'll have blocks where the emotionally they hit a wall, and if you push that it can cause like it to it's like if you can't stretch that far at that moment, but you might be able to in a month. So sometimes it's be like, look, this isn't off the table forever, it's just off the table today, and I just need, yeah. So I just wanted to say that about like liking stuff or not liking stuff.
Yeah, and
That's-
definitely.
yeah,
And
definitely.
you can try different things too. Like for a specific scene, you can try different.
like
Just-
Sid,
If you
might
have the
no
time and
problem-
someone wants to do it, I would say definitely just go for whatever they want just to see. Because in the editing room, you might be like, oh yeah, I do like their version better. Even if
Right,
you
like,
initially
might have-
don't.
you might have an actor or something that has no problem kissing people all the time for scenes if it's part of the story, and then something could happen and they go, for some reason I just can't, like it can happen, and then they might be fine in a month. Like say they got like a weird whatever infection from the mouth, that might be a little scared for a hot minute, which we'll avoid, but I don't imagine like this is like
I
I've
feel
never
like the
experienced
thing that I hear a lot is, oh, my first kiss and the
experience.
boy's breath smelled like onions or something. I hear
Yeah,
that.
they might be like a little bit apprehensive if they've had a bad experience, and they might not be off the table. It just
Mhm.
might be like, look, I just need a minute to like, whoa. So
Gotcha.
that's something, yeah, to be
Yeah.
to be noticed of.
Bringing that to lighting, yeah, there's like a lot of differences in what a director and what a cinematographer will want. Sometimes they'll want completely different things for a scene. And so it's good to always try both if you have the time and the resources available, so that you can have both options, because the more options you have, the more you can choose from when you actually get to editing it and seeing, oh, do you like the way you originally thought? Do you like the way the cinematographer did it? And also it's good to be on the other side of that and be the cinematographer and trying to get the director to let you shoot something. If they don't, just be okay with it and let it go, because you know they're the ones that are doing the story. And if you're the director, try to let your team have a voice. If you have the time and resources, like I said, try to let them have something too, so that you can, like I said, have those options.
Yeah, because sometimes it's not just them being like, it's my way or the highway. Sometimes it's simply, we don't have time for that. This is the plan we made. We're going.
Or maybe it
through
just doesn't go with the story. I've heard that be a
That
huge
too,
thing
yeah.
for the cinematographer and the director's fight. Is like the cinematographer wants it to look the best, and the director wants it to flow with the story and represent the story the best. So, you know, they sometimes clash on that, because maybe that dreamy look isn't as good looking as what the cinematographer wanted for it. It's not as crisp or something, and he wanted it to look different. But
maybe it looks
because
cool,
they
yeah,
needed
but
it
it
to be
doesn't
a little
match
bit
that
more
story.
dreamy or a little bit more, you know, not natural feeling, then that's why the director wanted to go with that
And also, I
version.
think it's
And I
a
think-
sequence is a series of shots, right? And it has to come up to that point where it's justified to use
Mhm.
Rembrandt lighting. I mean, that also plays into the mood, and the vibe of the scene as such.
What? Sorry, you're kind of muffled. What was that last part?
That's what Sarah was mentioning, that it also depends on the mood and vibe of the whole scene as such. Where
Oh yeah, yeah. It
have,
depends on
like,
the
it's leading up
what's
to.
the reasoning for that lighting, which we'll get into with motivated lighting in a minute. But like, where's that lighting
Right.
coming from? Why is it looking this way? You know, and there's always should be a reason for it or where it's coming from.
Because it's so artistic, it has to lead up to it with sequence of other shots, which would also set up the mood
Right.
for the story.
Yeah, and then you can't have it like go from one clashing side to the other in the same scene, or you shouldn't unless it's, on purpose. The main thing everyone says is like try to, know these things so that when you are choosing not to go with them, you know what you're doing instead of just accidentally doing something and then coming around to it. And because you didn't know, because of ignorance, you have that mistake. But instead of
I think
like
the
being an artistic
example,
choice and you choosing not to go with it and breaking that quote unquote rule because you wanted it to be that way.
yeah, I think what he said was learn the rules before you break them and learn the rules so that you can break them. And when you do break them, they're on purpose and not because you just didn't know, because you can tell when a rule has been broken purposefully, and you can tell when it's a mistake, especially in something like cinematography. You can definitely tell.
Sarah, you have your
Yeah.
hand raised?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, when it comes to like arguments between like cinematographers and directors or like creative differences and stuff, that can be hard. And how would be the best way to handle that in the easiest and fastest way possible?
That's really tough because it depends on how stubborn each person is. If you're the director gets final say.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Unless the
every
producer
cinematographer says
overrides
that.
them, which is what I've heard, that is not very common because they chose that director for a reason and they're trusting
Or
them
good
do.
to even do as a cinematographer to go like, well, I'm gonna go to the producer. That just makes you look like a.
Well, it's
Yeah.
like if the producer overhears it and they're like, no, let's do that.
I
But
have heard of like
that's
having
more rare.
arguments.
So it is always
Yeah.
up to the director to make the final choice, which is why I said the cinematographer, if you are the cinematographer and you're getting in a clash and you think it's one way, try to convince the director to let you do it. If not, don't take it personally. Don't, hold a grudge against him the whole shoot, because it's just going to make everything harder. So
And that is
having an
something that we
understanding of
heard.
time crunches and budget and all of that is also very important to all of these job roles and job functions, because not everything that you think is going to be cool or you think is going to work is going to be cool or is going to work. And even if it is cool and does work, doesn't mean that you're going to have the time to do it and the thing that the director wants to do. So,
And we've heard that from cinematographers and actors alike, because sometimes an actor can have an idea for a role and for a scene, and it can be like, oh, what about this? And it doesn't work for whatever reason. So both the cinematographer and the director, they say at the end of the day, give your suggestion. The final word is the director's, and don't take it personally, move on and just be like, you know what? At the end of the day, like I said this so much last semester, I'll say it again. You are all working as a team. You are all working together to make the best product possible. It is not a competition. You might have different ways of how to get there. You might have different perspectives. But at the end of the day, remembering that you are a team and that you all want the same goal, which is to make an incredible product, an incredible work of art, that will help a lot. And
I
just
always
keep
say,
letting
like,
respect.
oh, yeah, go ahead.
What do they say?
Def-
Like, cinematographer and director are like a married couple, right? The relationship is like so close that when they work on the scenes. It's almost like they have to understand each other, compromise in a lot of ways, not compromise, but for the good of the story and good of the scene.
Mhm.
But the
Definitely.
relationship is very key.
Yeah, and that's
And
why
that's
a
why
lot
they
of
usually like work with
directors.
the same people, because they know that they
Yep.
can work well together, and you always see these same guys and same names
Right.
because they all know, okay, I know what's going to come from him. I know what he's going to bring to the table. I know what I'm bringing.
They
and I
can
know how we
trust each
work
other
together.
more too, because he can be like, you know what? I know this cinematographer. I know his vision. If he's telling me to do something, there must be a purpose to it. I'm going to give it a try. You
I
know,
always look at it like a military unit, like a what do you call it? Can't think of the word right now. But anyway, you guys know what I mean. The director is the one in charge, so they should know how to lead well, but they also need to know how to stand firm with what they choose, and the people underneath them need to be able to follow the leader and suggest things, but also be able to know that it's up to that leader to finally make the decision. And if the decision ends up being wrong or something that is worse than what the person underneath them suggested, it doesn't matter, because it's still up to that person in charge to make that choice of how they want to go about doing it. So
And you
it's
can
on
always
them.
think
It's a
of it as-
responsibility on them as well. That's why the director gets credit and why they get, you know, like, oh, the director ruined this movie, or oh, the director, you know, did great on this movie. It's because they're the ones who are making the final decisions on all these things, and the responsibility of it turning out well is on their shoulders more so than anyone else in the crew.
And I think it
Besides
also
maybe the
helps.
producers.
And I think it also helps to have the mentality of, okay, next, like this time, I might not get what I want. Next time I'll work with someone else, maybe someone I know a little better, or maybe next time I'll fight a little more for this, or maybe, you know, like this isn't your only opportunity to try this thing out. Like you will have other chances. So don't look at it as like my only chance to try
Right.
this.
Because the other thing about like the military unit thing is like he needs to know how to lead well so that his team works well and efficiently together, and doesn't, you know, if they hate something or if they're totally against it, then they might be, they're going to be less efficient. They're not going to be as good. They're not going to be as in the moment. They're going to be in their head thinking and, you know, all these things. So like they need to know how to lead well and lead these different people to make them a unit, to make them a group. And that's kind of like how I see it with directing and on a set. You got to be able to know there's going to be different people. There's going to be different opinions. You need to know how to talk to people. You need to know how to, you know, do all these different things like confrontation and settling matters.
Going
And
with
but you also
professionalism
need to
first,
know,
above
and everyone
all.
should know, that it is the final say does go to that director.
If someone is not being professional to you, you remember you are being professional. You are here to do a job. You will, you know, you're going to do that job. If someone is being difficult, you are going to do your part and communicate and try your best. If it's a bigger issue, then that's something that they might end up having to deal with later, or that you might have to talk to someone else about if it's serious. But at the end of the day, just remember, you are there to do a job. You are doing that job. You might not be able to do every single thing you want from the job, but it's still a job. And so if you look at it from that professional view, it's a lot easier, in my perspective, in my opinion, to not get as offended or to not take it as personal when you're like, okay, well, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do this cool thing I wanted to at work, but I guess the boss didn't hear my idea, but I can keep going and maybe he'll hear my next idea. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. And I was just gonna say, within your personal boundaries, because for me, I wouldn't have an issue with most things unless I had if I've come up against something and I'm like, no, you can't push me there. And I say that it's for a very distinct and emotionally a reason. Although most of them I have gotten past. But
Right. So it's like
happens.
there's a difference between like boundaries and artistic vision. I think like that's where we're getting that confused. The artistic vision is what I'm talking about. Like that's why it's up to the director for that. The director,
Yeah, we're not talking
you know,
about
the director
things
can't
like
do illegal things. They
harassment
can't
or-
push people against what they want. That's not allowed. That's not legal. They shouldn't anyway. I know, you know, some
Yeah.
do, but
Yeah.
I'm talking
That
about
is
more of like the
completely-
creative aspects of like where those choices come from, who gets those ideas, and who gets final say. Not so much about like where can you push actors and how far can you take things, and you know that kind of
We're
thing. We're
talking about more of a professional setting of like, are we going to go with A or B? What choice are we going to make for this thing? That kind of thing.
Fantastic. I totally agree. And you know what? At the end of the day, the director is the one who sees the full vision. So you kind of want them to be like, at the end, you want them to call the shots because they're the ones seeing the full vision. If you're coming in from your job, you're only seeing it from that point of view. You can't see the whole thing. And if that's why the director, you know what I mean? That's why they have that job, because they're the
And
one
even if you do, at the end of
overseeing
the
it.
day, he's the one that was designated to be the boss. He gets the final say. We're just
Yeah.
like,
If you want to be the boss, go apply for the boss job.
or yeah,
Right.
maybe next time you can direct your film and you'll do it differently or something like that. But at this point, like, okay, he's a director right now, so we're gonna work with him. Anyway, let's move on.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions about that stuff, or you guys want to move on?
Oh my.
Not at the moment. I think that it's cool.
All right. So next thing is Chiaroscuro Lighting. Kira, I don't know. I think it's chiaroscuro. I'm pretty sure that's how it's pronounced. And even seeing the pronunciation is pretty hard because it's a huge weird word.
I
But
think
that
it's
is kind of
chiaroscuro or something like that, because
so
it's supposed to be bright and dark in Italian or something like that.
yeah, Chiara stands for
I think it's
clear
chiaroscuro
or something like that, clear and bright, and then oscuro
Means
stands
dark.
for like dark or obscure. So that's where the meaning comes from. Rembrandt Lighting actually uses this. It emphasizes the lights and the darks. That's what chiaroscuro is. It's like, that's why you see in these images, it's really showcasing the lights and the darks of the scene. Sometimes the people are in silhouette. Sometimes it's adding an emotion to their face or their features. Sometimes it's making them look larger than life with their shadows coming in, and you can see like the very different high contrast compared to the brights and the darks within the image. So it's not as consistent in the lighting. The lighting's not the same across the board. It has very high contrast between, you know, what is bright, what is dark, and usually the darks will be on that bright image, which casts that shadow, or usually the light will be on in front of that dark image, giving it a little bit more brightness, but only certain features, like in the bottom right picture. Film style emphasizes shadow and light. It was first emerged during the Renaissance as a painting technique. All these things come from paintings. These people that were, you know, just painting the stuff with their brushes and looking at the world and seeing it and recreating it or creating it how they want. That's where a lot of our styles come from within film and all these other mediums is from this very old techniques that were used in these paintings, and why different painters were considered better than others, because they had a certain style to their lighting. Lighting was the main thing. Within that picture, the lighting made it look very different and unique and told a different story depending on how that light was, where the shadows were, where what part of the scene is bright and why is that part bright? Why should we be focusing on that? So those kinds of things come into play when you're doing film, of course, because you want to highlight things with not just like blurring and focus, but you also want, you can do the same thing with lighting where you're having something in color or having something brighter than the rest of the image, so that people know what to focus on and what's important within a scene, especially if you see close-ups, like what part of it are we supposed to focus on? Their eyes? Are we focusing on their whole face? That's where lighting comes in, where you're trying to tell the story of like, what do we pay attention to? A lot of movies use this technique, like Godfather, he's in bright, the rest of the room's in darkness, kind of gives a little bit of like a, I don't know what to call it, but like a mystery or a suspense. And you can see he's wearing all black. So that really goes with the rest of the scene, because the seat's lit up, but that's black. And then the background's black, but his face is lit up. So those things are all contrasting against each other to really prominently show him sitting in that chair, rather than showing the background and all these other things that we don't want to pay attention to as much. We want him to be the most menacing or whatever in the scene, and you want him in the center of frame as well, to just show how important he is in that shot. Same things use the reversal. You have just light coming from the front, or you have light can come from the background as well. It doesn't really have a set rule. It's just saying like, there's a lot of high contrast, like I said, to compare one to the other. You don't have it lit up all across the board. You have it just lit up in certain areas. It's different styles you can do. People do it through windows. This is a painting of baby Jesus, I'm assuming, and it's like everything's dark except for baby Jesus, super lit up because he's the main focus, and he's lighting up everyone's faces because the light's coming off of him. And then that guy or that person in the background, you can't see them very well because they're not important. So we know not to really focus on him. We can see him, we know he's there, but we don't need to focus on him. The main focus is what's the brightest part of the image. Characterized by harsh lighting, creates an extreme contrast between different areas of the shot, such as the character's face. It can be used with color, but it also can be used black and white for a different feel. It's common in horrors, dramas, other types of media. And you can see like you have the light, the camera's coming down from, not coming down, the camera's at the bottom pointing towards the subject. And you have the background kind of slanted. And then you have that softbox coming from the side of them. And that's creating that nice stark shadow on them. So they have like, you know, they're lit up. The background's not getting lit up as much because the camera's not facing directly towards the background. The camera's going to be seeing the background up here where it's not lit. So that makes it a lot darker, and that makes the subject stand out a lot more. You can also use this, like that's kind of like a Rembrandt, but it's not enough to be like that triangle, but that's kind of that style. And it's the same thing. It uses chiaroscuro to really add depth and enhance that image. And the rest of his face kind of falls off to that shadow, while this part of his face is very lit and easy to see. So where we can just pay attention to his face. We're not paying attention to his clothes or what's behind him. It's basically just like using the darkness to accentuate and enhance the light. It's low-key lighting, of course. High-key means there's, you know, a lot of light everywhere, and it's used a lot in sitcoms and things like that. Low-key lighting is used more in like dramas and serious things, and you know, some sitcoms during a serious joke moment or something like that. But low-key is known more for, you know, a lot of darkness in most of the scene, or just, you know, a lot darker than everything being lit up and bright and easy to see. The easiest way to do this, to set this up, is in an isolated and controlled area, but it can also be done using just natural sources like a window that has light coming through it. As long as the rest of the room isn't really lit up, you will be able to get this same technique. Yeah, Avi, I really like this technique too. This is one of my favorites. I like it. I just like the high contrast, and it just looks very sharp and very pretty and cool. Like I don't know, I like it a lot. This is one of my favorite styles of different cinematography. When I see it in different movies, it's always usually has a lot of detail in it, but not too much to the extent where I don't know where to look because of all these, you know, dark places. It just makes the image pop a little more. They kind of pop out of that background. Whatever you're enhancing, whatever you're focusing on, whatever the light's shining on, just makes it really pop. We sent a video in the WhatsApp that kind of showed how you can do the same thing with color. A little bit, that kind of showed like if you change something to red, I think it was showing like 3 balls, but it made it look kind of like planets. And if you make one of them a little bit red or a little bit green or blue or something.
The video is in the syllabus, by the way, just to make that clear. The video is in the syllabus. We sent it through there. V, if you'd like, I can send it to you privately through email. But it's just because like we don't know if everyone's watching the syllabus or going through it, or if they even have time. We're like, oh, this is a really good one in case you guys didn't catch it or skipped it or something. But yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, it was. It really showcased like exactly what this does to the ball. Like when it was completely lit up, it looked flat. But when it had that shadow and then it had a background light coming at it from the other side where the shadow was coming, where the shadow was sitting on the ball, it made it look a lot more 3D. So because we're shooting everything in 2D, these kinds of images will really add that next depth and layer and dimension to it. So to make it look a lot more 3D and pop out a lot more, which might be why I like it a lot. But yeah, so this is just one way of doing it. And like a very popular technique that's used is just emphasizing the light, or emphasizing or using the darkness to emphasize the light, or even hiding your subject like in these 2 pictures with the light in the background so that we can't really see until they want us to. Anyone have any comments, questions, thoughts?
I remember, I think, who was it? Leonardo da Vinci.
What was that?
Da Vinci? Da Vinci?
It's kind of quiet, like it's kind of muffled.
Leonardo da Vinci?
Ah, yeah, Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah, so he used to tell, I guess his advice to the painters was to start with a black canvas and then put in subjects in the foreground, which well, you know,
Yeah, he would
and
say that it was because the black nature is dark until you add light to it or something like
accentuate,
that.
Hmm.
right, the light subjects in front, and you know everything else is in the background, like you were mentioning also about the blurriness, right, of the background, but the foreground is sharper. So I think the concept is very similar, where you actually want to focus the viewer's attention on the subject, so what
Yeah.
they're doing or what they're
Yeah, so
saying.
that the
And I
subject
think
is the
there's
main
another,
focus.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I
painter,
find it so interesting,
Caravaggio.
because there's so much you can do with it. Whether you want to hide them in mystery, hide them in the shadow for, you know, something for scary, or just make it more, I don't know, like it just adds a little bit more
Accentuate
dimension
one
into it.
character more than the other.
Right.
Right.
And I think those days, right? I mean, this was in Europe that they had this big Venetian windows which carried the light inside the room, and the painter would essentially put their models or you know the subjects with that light, and be creative in how the light comes on them, and then kind of paint them to you know, say to basically project what they had in the mind as to how the scene should look like, how the picture should look.
Yeah.
And there's another painter, Caravaggio. I think he's also pretty popular in this similar type of painting that he did.
What? I'm not talking right now. Oh, sorry, Priscilla's talking to me over there. Anyway, yeah, so like,
Sorry.
no, you're good. She's walking me through the room.
We had
But
his,
yeah, I agree. Like it, and it a
Silence
lot
of
of
Black
like I said, like a lot of
there.
these things come from these painters, and you know, Europe. That's why everyone loves these European paintings, is because they had all these different styles and all these different ways of showing or emphasizing certain things within the painting, and that's, you know, where we get all these techniques from for the most
The use
part.
of shadow in a paint, it's just incredible. It really is. The fact that it's pretty incredible that we took on how to light light from paintings. Like it's really crazy to think that. Sometimes it's kind of ironic. It's like the way that they played around with light and shadow and dimensions with paint and art is how we now make video in real life seem through movies.
Yeah,
I don't
and
know,
it's
that's
because
kinda
like
cool to
they're
me.
just observing the world and seeing how things look, and like Vish was saying, they had like these, you know, all these architectural things, like these different windows and these different light that would affect, reflect, or adjust the light, and that's where they would get a lot of their ideas from, is because they have all these different types of refracted or stylized light that would come through these different things, these different windows or these different building shapes, and then they would start coming up with these ideas and seeing like, you know, oh, if I paint it like that, it's going to look just like how it looks if we're in this building and it's coming through that window hitting them from the side, and if they turn around it's going to look like this. And just observing the world is probably why we copy these so much, is because we do want these things to look like it's real. We do want it to look like it's coming from the world, but we also want it to look like the prettiest it can be, and the prettiest, the best version of the world that we see within each shot. But yeah, does anyone else have any comments or questions?
Not at the moment. Lighting's super cool because it is cool how much you can actually do.
It's cool. Yeah, it changes everything depending on what you do, what you don't do, what you leave out, what you add in. It changes like the picture completely. So the emotion of the scene just completely changes depending on how you're doing it. Even with the same lights, like it's crazy. All right, so next, actually that leads me, that's pretty good lead into this next thing is motivated lighting, like what we were talking about. Vish was talking about it. It needs to have a reason for being there for the most part. You want it to naturally be in the scene, giving the light a reason to be coming from where it's coming from. You know, you want it to imitate a natural source, or to, you know, look like it belongs there, integrate it into the scene. Like this thing is saying, if the motivation is moonlight and your light is producing hard light at 5600 Kelvin, which is that, you know, lighting scale, it's not going to sell the scene. You need it to be on the same color temperature as whatever you're trying to, not color. You need it to be on that same color temperature as whatever light you're trying to imitate, so that it looks like it's real, looks natural. Kelvin, what am I calling this? That. So yeah, like down by, you know, the more orange look, you got the candlelight, just like a lot less in the Kelvin scale than you would if you were doing like overcast daylight or a moonlit sky. It's going to be a lot higher up there to make it more blue looking. And that's just how color temperature affects what we're shooting, like we learned about last semester. And doing that, as well as where the light's coming from, will really sell the scene. It'll really make sense to everybody. So it's really important when you're doing when you're using the motivation, when you're doing motivated lighting, when you're trying to sell it, like this light's coming from the lamp and that light hitting him in the back is coming from this lamp. Usually those lamps are going to be set so low and dim that they're not actually going to cast any light on your subject, because otherwise the camera would pick it up and it would be overexposed. Those lamps would look very bright, way more bright than they are right now. So what you do with motivated lighting is you take those light sources, which practicals, like we were learning about like a week or two ago, those would be considered practicals because they're in the actual frame. Then you can motivate the light by saying that the light is coming from those two lamps. And people looking at it aren't going to be like, no way, you know, he's not getting lit up by that lamp. You're not even going to think about it because you see the lamps there, you see lights coming from that angle, and you just assume, and it's coming from the same color temperature, and you're just assuming, oh yeah, that lamp is giving in that light. It's, you know, you can imitate light, you can accentuate light, you can make it, you know, brighter, better looking. Like I said, like if those lights, they might be casting some kind of light on him, but he's probably, you know, he's using another light off to the side to really motivate that light, to make it look like it's coming from the lamp, even though really it's coming from off screen on a studio light. You don't really want your light sources to seem like they're coming from a light source. You want them to seem like they're coming from something in the scene for a reason. Now, this isn't always possible, but for the most part, you want to be able to try to, you know, showcase that the light is there. It's not just coming out of nowhere, because that will take people out of that scene, out of that movie, and make them think about it. And you don't want that. So like this, you have two lamps on the sides and you have her computer screen. So they're giving it, these lamps are a little bit more on the orangish side. They're more tungsten. And you got the computer screen being a little more blue. So they're having a blue hue and a blue light cast down on, or cast up at her, because the light's supposed to be coming from below. And then they have these two lights on the sides that are giving off light in that background area. They probably have motivated light, where they're having lights on each side of those lamps cast to the background. And then, you know, that computer screen, that's probably not giving off that much light. There's light even on the background. So computer screens don't give off that much light. They're probably using a light, setting it to that color temperature to make it a little more blue and white, like how a computer screen looks, and then casting that up at her and also on that background. So then it makes that whole scene come together. You're not thinking about it, but you know, if you take the time and actually think about it, you're probably going to be like, oh yeah, there's no way that computer screen is lighting up everything. But when we're watching movies, you should be focusing on the story, hopefully, so you don't really pay attention to all these technical details. That's what's so good about being behind the scenes. You get it all done, you see it all, and it should all flow together so that no one's paying attention. If you do your job right in lighting, no one's going to even notice, unless they're paying attention, which they shouldn't be if you did it well. Not most of the time, they shouldn't be paying attention to how the lighting is. You can use the surrounding area. Like, so when you get to a scene and you're getting on set, you might want to use like the surrounding area to help show where the light could be coming from. If there's a window or maybe there's a red
honey,
sign.
I think what you meant was notice, not, because I think I remember the expression you're trying to say. It's like, if you do your job right, no one's going to notice it.
Isn't that what I said?
As far as, well, I don't know, the way you worded it was a little weird. Because I think you said pay attention or something.
Right, you don't want people to pay attention to the light. Why are they paying attention to the light so much? They
No,
should.
I mean, you can pay attention.
They should pay attention to the story more than the light.
I mean, yeah, you're probably right. I'm cooking, so I'm sometimes, yeah, sorry.
No, you're probably, I mean, you might be right. I don't know.
I know the way you worded it was a
meant
little
it
weird,
anyway.
and I was trying to like remember what the person said exactly, and I was like, that's not what he said. But I understand what you were going for, and I'm sure everyone does. Just means that if you're good at your job, people won't notice like, oh, that's a cool shot. They'll just be like, wow, that's pretty. So
just like with sound, you don't really want people to notice the sound. You want them to hear it and it just flows with the rest.
Be seamless. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good, honey. But as I was saying, like if there's a window, if there's a red sign or a reflective surface somewhere. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to add there, you both are right. I think you mentioned it from the flow perspective, and the other perspective was basically personal perspective. So you do want to notice that the person has done the lighting because he has done such an absolutely fabulous job that it flows so smoothly in the scene that you don't even notice that there is, there's any problem there. So,
yeah, I'm not good at expressing myself, but yeah, you got it right. That's what I meant. I just mean that, like, yeah, you should notice, like, wow, that's beautiful, because you used the word, used a different wording or whatever, and I was like, you just shouldn't think about, oh, what did they do to light it? You should just look at a fireplace and be like, wow, that's a pretty shot. Not, oh, they probably had a light over here, they probably had a light over there to get that shot. Right. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you don't want any of the audience members to start thinking about where that light's coming from or how that's lit. You want them to just buy it, and to sell that scene, you want it to look like it's coming from whatever sources you present within that scene, which is motivated lighting. Like I said, it's not always possible. Sometimes you're outside and you're doing a night scene and it's completely pitch black, but you still want your actors to be seen. So obviously there's going to be, some light. So they try to show that there's a moon or something and the light's shining down and that's why they're lit up. And you can kind of buy it, but you kind of see that like it's not going to light them up the way that they really are. So like, sometimes it's the moon's behind them, but somehow the front of them's lit up, but sometimes you just have to like try your hardest to get it to seem like you are like there's a reason for that light, like it's coming from somewhere, and you don't have
and
to.
Plus most people won't put as much thought to it. They'll just suspend their disbelief because they're so used to seeing it in cinema. They know there's a light there. They can see, oh, that's pretty lighting. They only notice it when it doesn't feel real, like, oh, that doesn't look like moonlight, that doesn't look like a light, a moon, the color of the moon, or the way the moon would hit or something like that, So people are used to suspending their disbelief for the most part, as long as it looks realistic enough, I feel.
Yeah.
I guess this falls more on the cinematographers, the DP's quote, right, where he has to, he's the one who's coming up with this creative, thinking as to how the light should be coming in this direction.
And he'll be working with the gaffer to like figure out the lighting plan and all of that.
Right. I think that's why the DPs and the cinematographers are more important in picking up the scene. Getting the sense
Yeah,
of the
at the
scene.
same time,
Yeah.
I feel like they're yes and no. I always like to think that it's a collaborative effort because at the end of the day, yeah, you can have a cinematographer and a director, but if you don't have a good gaffer, if you don't have a good camera operator, you can have the best director and cinematographer out there. You're still not going to get the same result. So I'm always like, every role is important in a specific way because it's just such a huge endeavor to the point where it's like every part is so crucial. So I feel like for leadership, definitely they are so needed and so important because the same can be said. You can have a great cameraman and you can have a great gaffer, but without a proper cinematographer or director to show them how to use, like where you want them to go and what they want you to do.
Especially if they didn't plan.
Especially, yes. Holy crap. You can, if the director and the DP didn't plan it out, you can have the best crew in the world. You're not going to get great results. So yeah, I'm not saying that you're wrong in any way. I'm just saying that like, I always try to look at it from that perspective because people have, some people have the view of, oh, well, of course, the most important job are those two and the others are just, little things. And they don't realize how huge, I'm not saying that's you. I'm just saying for like the people listening or the people that might see it one day, or even something to keep in your mind when you're working those smaller jobs for yourself, is that you are crucial as well. You are just as crucial to this whole huge machine working perfectly. But yeah, sorry. I just want to, because we've heard so many people degrade other job functions because of that. So I was trying to make that clear for people that are working in those smaller sectors as well. I'm not saying you did that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I think like everyone's important. That's why you need everyone to do their job, and why it's such a team collaborative effort. Any set you go on, you'll start to realize the more people you have and the more collaborative you guys can be, the better off it's gonna make that film.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, people are wanting to move up. They're wanting to gain experience slowly. I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, that's kind of part of life. There should be like a natural trajectory where you start a career and you get to slowly like climb the ladder.
I feel like not everyone is. I mean, I know a lot of people that are happy. They would hate to be a assistant director or a director or a DP because it's so much work and it's way too much pressure, or it's just not what they're made for. So I know a lot of people that love working in regular sound, and it's not necessarily like a job where you need to be promoted and promoted and promoted. Some people, yes, they do get promoted in certain sectors if they want, but we've spoken to a lot of people that are really happy working in that department, and that's where, because not everyone's meant to do every job. Like when we learned about script supervisors, I was like, holy crap, this is definitely not a job that any person can do. It takes a very specific personality, a very specific kind of person to do this. I could never do this. So I feel like, yeah, you definitely, if that is your dream, if that is your goal, and if you're working towards it and studying it, it is amazing where you can start learning all of the different job functions and growing and all that kind of stuff. But if you're happy in that function and maybe that other job might not be for you, that's okay too.
And here's the thing, you could be happy in like a certain job and love that job, but also be working on other things towards other things. And I don't think that that's bad. I think that that's necessary and important to have that balance of like, I like where I am, but I'm still not going to let that stop me from growing. And I think that having a growing environment matters, being around people that encourage each other and you're safe and aggressive, but also respectful and not, don't try to like dip over your boss. Like that's not cool. I wouldn't want to be dipped over as an employee. It's a give and take. It's just like, yes,
I've never heard that expression, but I learned it today. Thank you.
Dipped over.
I never heard it before.
That's not my MO. It's like if you get a job, it's got to be fair.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I learned a new word today. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm gonna bring it back to lighting again. So what I was saying earlier is you want to see your surrounding and let that help show where the light is going to be coming from. If there's like a window or there's a red sign, maybe your person's using a computer like in this, you want to adjust your lights where they are coming from. You want to adjust what color temperature they are. If there's a red sign and you want to really showcase that red sign or the light coming from it, you know, that it's probably not going to give off too much light. But if you get a red gel and you put it over one of your own lights and not reflect it and shine it from that side of the room, it's going to really accentuate that red light and make it seem like, you know, the person's getting that red reflection. Not well, you know what I mean, but it coming from that red sign instead of it just being kind of a little more natural and not as accentuated, not as, you know, red, I guess. So using these, you can really enhance your scenes and make them look a lot better. You can really make it make sense so no one's questioning why it's lit or where it's coming from. And you really want to showcase it early on. You want to establish where those sources are. So that's why a lot of scenes will start with a wide shot. This isn't every case, of course. I'm just saying, generally you want to show like a wide shot, and that way you can kind of see the setting. You can see where the lights are, especially if you're using motivated light and you're showing that there's a lamp and there's a ceiling light and there's all these different light sources. That way, when you actually put in your lights and you have them shining from those same directions, nobody questions it. If you do the reverse, you start from the front, the close up, and go back. It has people question it a little more than they would if you do it from going from wide to close up, just because they already know where those light sources are. If you start with a wide, so those are some things to keep in mind, that even if you're not establishing it right away, you still want to establish it kind of early on instead of having the scene go until the end and then showing where your lights are. If you're using motivated lighting. That doesn't always mean that you have to show a light source. Sometimes you can just pretend there's a window there and, a light's coming from a side of the wall that you're not going to be shooting. And people will just assume that's a window, because just have to make sure you're setting it, the light temperature and that kind of thing, to those settings so it looks like it's daylight. It looks like it's sunlight coming in and bleeding into the room. And that way people will just buy it and they won't even have to see it. So there's different ways you can go about getting it, but you just want to make sure that you're using the room and the space to make it make sense of why it's colored that way, why it's coming from that direction, and all those other things. And that's what motivated lighting is for. It's just to kind of show, like, why is there light and where is it coming from and why, and giving it a reason to come from those areas. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that? Another thing, like in this picture, actually, this is what's called like color contrast, which is used a lot in film and media, so that you can have different parts of the room or different parts of the scene or even different parts of the subject contrasted in different colors. So like she's bluish in the middle, the whole background is kind of blue, but then you have these warmer colors coming from the sides, and that's adding a bit of color contrast, making it a little bit more dynamic. The color range is a bit more, because it's not as flat looking. There's different colors to look at, and it's having contrasted colors to make it really stand out a little bit more than it would if those lights were the same color as the rest, or if there was no computer screen, she was just lit up by those lights and everything's yellow. It wouldn't be the same look. It would be a lot different. It would be, it could still look good, but it would be less contrasted, which means it would be less dynamic, which isn't always a bad thing, but it's just something to keep in mind. That color can also add a bunch of different emotion and looks to your scene as well, especially when you're using different ones. And I'm sure you guys have seen movies where they use, like, purples and greens, and a lot of movies do these where it's like the blue and the orange and the blue, or they reverse it and put orange on the person and blue on the sides and stuff like that. They do all sorts, but you look at a color wheel and you look at the opposite direction of those color wheels, that's usually those colors that they're using. blue and orange are on the opposite side, which means they kind of complement each other pretty well. And that's kind of like one of those color rules that a lot of people go with. But with everything in film, you don't have to follow it exactly like that. You can always change it up. Maybe green and blue, maybe purple and blue, maybe purple and green, whatever you want. Or you can just make it look as natural and not really that colored as you want. That's what's so great about it. You can change so much just with color and light and make it have a completely different look and feel for the whole scene, one shot, the whole movie, whatever you want. All right. Last thing I'm going to talk about. This was something that I was so glad to finally understand. Sound decibels. There are different kinds of sound decibels, and that's where I would always get confused. There's the sound decibels you use when you're recording and editing, digital audio, which has a different decibel system, which is the system used to like show you how loud or quiet something is. And then you have in real life, you have, I believe it's SPL, dB SPL, like sound pressure level, which is how loud our ears hear things in real life, like a bird chirping compared to a jackhammer, and when it starts getting dangerous. And that's set at a different scale. So the dB, the decibels, is going to be very different than when you're trying to record audio. If you tried to record audio to the same level of decibels that you're hearing it in real life, it's going to sound terrible because it's not even using that same scale. It's basically a different thing entirely. And that's where all my confusion came in. And there's another one. There's one last one. I don't know what the certain term is, but it's a decibel used for like how much voltage is going into it, preamps, stuff like that, for using like music and stuff. When I was looking into this at first, I was finding a lot of information on that, and it was confusing me so much because it's completely different than what we do when we're recording and editing it in digital audio. Analog audio is very different, and it has a different scale as well. So I'm going to skip talking about real life sound pressure level, the SPL. That it doesn't apply to what we're talking about today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the other two. Mostly I'm going to talk about what's called decibel full scale. So dBFS, and that's what goes into your recorders. That's what goes into the editing. They use this scale so that you can record the levels at the right loudness levels, basically. Sorry. So this decibel full scale, dBFS. It's mixing console. Oh, sorry, that's something else. All right. So anyway, the Zoom recorder has the decibel full scale on it. And what the decibel full scale means is once you get to zero decibels, if you get to that or higher, it's going to distort your audio, making it sound like crap. You'll get that stuff that sounds kind of like this, and it doesn't sound very good. You can even have it just cut off and make a weird screeching noise, depending on how loud it's going to get. So this scale, when we're recording, uses negative decibel numbers to show you what the level is of the audio. Once you get it up to that zero, it's going to sound bad. So you never want it to hit zero. When you're recording, you always want the levels to be under zero no matter what. And that's why they usually say the general consensus that I've heard from a few different people that I've studied so far says around -12 to -10 is where you want it to kind of be at when you're recording audio, dialogue and stuff like that. When you're recording audio for a feature, you're focused on people's speaking. So -10 to -12 to -10 will give you a good range where if they start to get louder because they're starting to get more excited in the scene or they're starting to scream or something, you still have enough room to kind of adjust it before it gets to that zero and really starts to sound ugly. And that's why you want to keep it around that time. That's what's called like peak audio. Peak audio, they say to keep it around like -6 or, maybe a little bit higher, but don't get too close to zero because if you do, like I said, it's going to sound hideous. So what these recorders will usually do, Zoom H4n, this is what I'm looking at right now. This is what I actually own. I don't think it shows you once it gets red, but what most recorders will do is they'll show you these lines, and you have that left channel and the right channel for this stereo audio. And it's showing you how loud it's getting. Right now, that left bar is in between. It's right around like negative, maybe, let's say negative 14, something like that. But what most recorders will do is once it gets up to like -6 and beyond, it'll start to turn red. First, it'll be green, then it'll turn yellow, and then it starts turning red. And that red means, hey, you're about to hit that mark where it's gonna not sound good. So you be careful what you're doing, how loud you're recording it.
No, honey, the yellowish orange is the one that says you're about to hit that mark. The red is you've gone too far, is what the guy was saying.
Right. I just know like one does -6 and above is kind of red. So I feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like it
because
definitely
you can
must
go over
vary.
-6 without it sounding like crap, but they just say
I
that
feel like
be
it
careful
definitely must
because it
vary
could be
between sound
clipping.
systems. Yeah,
It probably depends on which recorder you're using, honestly.
yeah.
But yeah, you're right. So the red would say that you're not, most recorders show red whenever it's saying you're clipping, which means that it's cutting off and making it sound ugly.
That's why I would recommend like know more about your recorder before using it. Just know the limits and what each thing means. Because yeah, it could definitely mean different things for different recorders. So sorry, honey, I didn't mean to be like, no.
No, you're right.
I just wanted to clarify that. But it sounded a little
And
bit.
also, I think sometimes when you have your settings for the sound set, right, before you actually begin to film, there may be, depending on the scene, it could go in a very extreme loudness level, right? So if you have sorry, I'm just
So
walking
muffled.
outside. I'm outside and
Are you talking about presets? Like remove the presets from those?
no, what would happen is like, let's say if you have, like for instance, right now, right, open area, and then it's a very quiet area, but all of a sudden you have like a plane going by, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden your level that you have set your equipment for goes beyond that, right? So you get a very peak sound, and that could happen even in a normal conversation when you have two people talking, and all of a sudden there is a confrontation going on, right? Because of some topic that got raised, and one person raises his voice, and that could be like a peak. And having the right level kind of helps it to capture even when that thing goes peak, because once it goes peak, then that audio is pretty much, as we talked earlier, that it gets noticeable, and then the whole scene is kind of
Yeah,
not
one thing that they talked about that I thought
so
was
like
interesting
that's why it's always good to have like Vish was saying, like that's why you always want a sound person monitoring your audio if you can, because that way if somebody does start to get louder and then all of a sudden that level is raising and it's getting really close to that zero, they can turn down the gain, causing it to not be as loud, which means it won't be clipping, it won't be cutting off and making it ugly. So that's why they usually have somebody, or if they know the scene, they know that, well, in this scene, they talk kind of quietly, but then they start getting heated and then they start fighting louder and louder. They know to turn down the gain as the scene goes so that whenever they are yelling at each other, it still comes out clean and it's not distorted and ugly sounding, because they've turned down the gain, which means they're turning down how loud that's going to come into the recorder.
right.
And
A good
there's
mixer
also,
would ride the gain. A good mixer would ride the gain, that's what I think the term that they use is riding the gain.
Yeah.
And whenever, depending on the sound, like for instance, if a male and a female, the female voice is kind of a little bit softer, and what happens is the settings would not be the same. That's why the boom mic, when they're actually checking the boom mic, they'll change the direction of the boom mic either way, when there are two people talking. And one person may be loud enough, but the other person may not be loud enough for the same audio level. So, you kind of have to watch out for that also.
Yeah. And that's where I think like last week we talked about there's some shotgun mics that can record flat. What was it called? Flat line off axis, which is like it'll still sound good. It won't sound terrible, but it'll just be quieter. And then if you do have those two people talking, one's louder, the other one's quieter. Sometimes they'll just position it in the middle, and then set it for that loud person. Or no, sorry, they'll aim it towards the quiet person, because the off axis will be quieter, but it'll still come in good. And then that louder person will be almost at the same level as the quiet person. But of course, that depends on your equipment.
And then there's those tools that the guy was talking about, right?
Yeah, and I'll get into that in a minute. There's some functions you can set on your recorder or your mics even that kind of adjust how that sound's going to be recorded in, so that if you do have these these things that are going to happen that you can't really control, you have a few options to try to limit the amount of sound coming in, or take away some of those quiet volumes, like the room noise, the low frequencies, like the room noise, stuff like that. And I'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, I think that preset is kind of critical, because what happens is, like, if you're doing a 2-shot scene and then you go over the shoulder of one person, and then the preset would come in handy, because that preset would be set for, let's say, a female cast, and then you change to preset 2, which is going to be on the male cast. So you kind of cover both the ranges with the same,
Yeah.
but it's for a different scene.
And it's just easy to flip back and forth if you can do it like that. Right. And that's where it also depends on the equipment, and why it's usually good, if you can, to get a multi-track recorder. And I'll talk about that in a second too.
Yeah, because one of the things that he was saying was, well, you'll explain it, like the pros and cons of it.
So this is gonna be, I know it's a lot of information. This one's the one that got me the most. Like, I had to like really pay attention and study it to get it. But the decibels for the mixing consoles and stuff
I just
like
like
that.
intervening in between just to prove him that I was actually paying attention. Like, see, I know things.
Because I made you pay attention.
Shut up.
The decibels for like mixing consoles and adjusting audio is going to be different from the decibels for recording and editing. So this sound scale on this recorder, 0 is the max. You don't want it to touch it. You don't want it to go over. Otherwise, it distorts and gets ugly. On a mixer, that will have 0, means that you have no gain and no attenuation, which means like the gain is going to boost the signal, making it louder. Attenuation is going to lessen the signal, making it quieter. So 0 is actually kind of sort of more like the middle. And that's when you like have these, let me show you. That's when you have like these little adjusters and these knobs and all of that. Like
That looks
this
super
right here at the
intimidating,
bottom.
right? I know.
What?
That looks super intimidating.
Right. So what this is like all these things at the bottom are just the different mics, the different sound sources coming in. And what these little, what would you call those? The little white things? The sliders, I guess. Those will
He had a
adjust.
specific word for it, but I do not remember what it was. Because he
Those
said
will-
it in
Slider,
one video.
knobs.
The
Huh?
knobs would be up here. What would the sliders you said?
Little white
Sliders,
things.
I think.
Okay.
Oh, well, he called it something. I thought that's what he was referring to.
No, I'm talking about the little white thing. So the sliders or whatever.
Me too, but oh well.
Each
That's
one
fun size.
represents a different audio source. So a different signal coming in. At the top, you have all those mic inputs. So if you had all of them plugged in with some kind of mic, you'd have one for each. And you would be able to adjust starting from 0, which is around this one all the way to the bottom left. That is at that 0 point. The rest are at a little bit of a gain. So if you put it to 0, it's going to still have sound. It's not going to be completely quiet. You got to put this thing all the way at the bottom, which is infinity negative decibels for a mixing console. Infinity negative, and that would make it be completely quiet. Anything more than that, it's going to be like super quiet, but you're still going to pick up some sound. If you get to 0, that just means you're not adjusting the signal. You're not making it louder. You're not making it quieter. It's just going to come in exactly as it is. If you boost it up, you're going to make that signal louder. Why do these exist? It's because, like Vish was saying, there's certain people you might have that speak quieter, certain people that speak louder. So on that recording console, they're going to be monitoring it to make sure that it doesn't hit 0 or go over. However, on the mixing console, they're going to be either boosting it up or lowering it to make sure that it's within a certain range that they like on the recorder. So the mixer, it goes to the mixer and then it goes to the recorder, and then that's the final file. So the mixer, you can adjust it. If it's coming in too quiet, you just give it a boost. You just, you boost this up on whatever channel is too quiet. And that way it comes into this sound recorder and it's getting to that -12 or -10 decibels like you want, instead of just leaving it as is and it coming in like -24 or something really quiet. The reason you don't want it too quiet is because once you get it into editing room, depending on the equipment that you use to record, if you have it too quiet and you boost it in post-production, it usually adds a lot of noise. A lot of that room tone and stuff like that gets enhanced as well as everything else. And that's when you start hearing these staticky, ugly noises, is because you're boosting everything, not just the dialogue, not just the voice. The voice is at a certain frequency. The room tone is at a much lower frequency, which is why you don't really hear it. But once you get into post-production, if it's too quiet and the voice is too quiet, you got to boost that up too much. Eventually, that room tone is going to be boosted up so much that it's going to be really easy to hear, and it's going to be very ugly. So that's why you want to make sure to try to get your levels right when you're recording audio on set. Everything you do, try to get it right on set. It's always better than trying to fix it in post-production. So video is a little more forgiving, I would say, than audio, from what I can tell. If audio is clipping, it's really, really difficult to fix. So you never want it to go over 0. That's like having the video be completely white, like we were saying, and it overexposed to the max, and then there's no information there. Same thing with clipping. You'll see on a sound wave, if I can get to it. So on a clipping audio with sound wave, it just becomes a flat line. That red one is clipping. There's more to it. Like you see the blue line that shows like that whole sound wave, that's the whole entire thing. It has more of a shape. But once you get it to that -1 area, it's going to start clipping, and that's going to make it just a flat line. It's going to be cutting off some of the frequency, some of the top or bottom of the frequency, making it sound very hideous. So that's why you don't want it. If you want, there was a video, I think we even sent it in the WhatsApp, and it showed the difference. It explained it really well, and it showed like how he's talking, and then when he shows it clipping, it just sounds more, I don't know, it has a weird, unique sound to it. So I would recommend checking it out if you don't know what it sounds like. But if you've ever seen like a local TV news program or something, not news program, but local TV, like somebody building something in his garage or whatever, they usually have pretty ugly audio, and it's either too low or too high to where it's clipping, and you can kind of tell what bad audio sounds like. So back to this. Mixing consoles. 0 decibels means you're not doing anything to it. No.
I'd like to add one thing there is that the gain is, you always want to have a good gain on the actual signal. And then you need to attenuate the noise. So, keep noise as low as possible. That could be background noise or, anything static coming in from the set. That's why I think they kind of shut off all the, what do they say, fluorescent lights and fridge and, refrigerators and all, because they made certain frequency which kind of interfere with the actual signal, and which is going to be difficult to clean later on. So that's
Right.
why keeping the noise low is kind of critical.
That's why they always try to like turn off all the different things making noise. Like you said, like a lot of productions, if they're in a kitchen, they'll unplug the fridge. They'll just be sure to plug it in once they're not recording or whatever, or at the end if there's nothing in that fridge, hopefully. But because fridges make noise, if you've ever, just been in your kitchen and it's all, everything else in your house is quiet, the fridge will all of a sudden either turn on or it's just always constantly making a slight humming noise. Same thing with air conditioning and things like that. So you always want to try to get the sound as best as possible. You want there to be as little surrounding noise as possible. You don't want there to be that noise of the air conditioning coming on. You don't want there to be the noise of, the fridge or the microwave, unless, well, no, actually you don't want it to be. You can always add it later in post. So you always want to try to make it as quiet as possible in the room, give it as little room tone, as little ambient noise as possible. And that way you can really focus and hone in on those people and what they're saying in a dialogue. Even in a big crowd scene, you'll see, like, if you ever watch behind the scenes and there's a big crowd, they're miming. They're not actually talking. They want to capture that clean audio source of just the actor talking. They don't want to capture a bunch of people in the background. They capture that audio later. They either put it in post or they do what we call the wild track, where they just have the people murmur and stuff and talk to each other, and they record that separately. So they always want it to be as quiet as possible so they can focus on what they want to record. That way they get clean audio sources, and that way it sounds as good as it can before they get it into the editing room. So when you're mixing, if you're going negative, that means it's attenuation, which is just a word meaning it's going to reduce the loudness. If you're putting it above 0, it's mean you're adding gain, which means you're just boosting the signal, making it louder. The other thing that's really confusing about decibels is the way they function is on, it's not like it's not a linear scale. It is logarithmic. So let me just kind of show that real quick. So that's kind of like how the sound is. I mean, I could probably actually find one that's 4 decibels. All right. So as you can see, with each step, it doesn't really change that much at first until you start getting a little further in, and then all of a sudden it starts changing a lot with each step. And that's what a logarithmic scale does compared to a linear scale, which linear is just like every time you go up one, it goes, it goes up one exactly the same. And when you're recording dialogue and audio and all this stuff, decibels act differently. They act like if you put it at, if you go from 1 decibel to 2 decibels on a mixer, it's not going to be as much of a difference as if you go from like 10 decibels to 11 decibels, because that's going to be further on the scale, which is going to have a bigger gap, a bigger jump up. So the loudness is going to increase even more. So it's something to keep in mind. You don't really need to focus too much on it. It's a lot of science, but if you are recording, you just want to be aware that if your audio is too quiet, don't boost it up too much, because the more you boost, the louder it gets with each one. Like it gets louder and then it gets louder and then it just keeps going up like that. Like it just exponentially increases. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't want to add too much. You want to make sure you kind of like always test it beforehand, but you just want to be aware of those things as well. If anyone's ever seen like this is where like analog audio is very is different than digital, is because of every time you go up in a decibel, the amount of power needed goes up exponentially. And that's why in a scene like Back to the Future, when he ups the amp completely, it blows out the whole system because it's trying to use too much power at once, because he added too much decibels, even though he only went up to, whatever. If he, let's say 20, at that point, 20 decibels could be, like 1,000 times louder than 10 decibels. Even though from 1 decibel to 3 decibels, it was only 2 times louder, something like that. Like, just keep that in mind. Don't pay too much attention to it, because I don't really think it's necessary to need it unless you're trying to get into sound. But it is something to be aware of, that the further you go in, the bigger the change is going to be and how loud it will be. So now
I was gonna say, I feel like it's necessary if you work with sound, because not just if you work with sound, but if you work with music too, because sound, same thing. Because like if you have a sound system, let's say, and you buy it in your house for your guitar, and then
if you're recording that kind of stuff, then you definitely have to pay attention to it, because otherwise you're going to blow out your whole system.
Sometimes
I was saying it doesn't matter, because digital audio, you don't really have it using power, you just have it clipping when it gets too loud.
Yeah, I'm just saying
that's
just in case, because I know that when I hear, oh, just working with sound, I think of sound jobs. And so it also can go for, studio stuff or equipment and stuff
using
like
preamps and stuff like that. If you're recording musical equipment, or if you're recording analog audio with vocals, which I'm not even sure if you do that, I don't know. But if that's the case, then you want to be aware of that, because you can really disrupt your system, or it just draws so much power that it really starts heating up, or you might not have enough power in your outlet for it, stuff like that. So it's just something to keep in mind. But so it's very confusing, because all these different ways of recording audio. But for the most part, when we're doing filmmaking, we're recording digital. We are recording to digital, we are editing with digital. So we're using that 0 scale. And if you have someone mixing audio on set, they're going to be using that other scale, that where you either boost the loudness or you lower it to decrease the loudness. So there's recording levels, there's the audio mixing levels, and then there's also the audio export levels when you're finished with the project and you're exporting it. Recording levels is the main thing we should focus on. And then, audio exporting is next after that, if you're working on your own project and you don't have a big crew and everything. But once you start getting a bigger crew, you want to try to make sure that you have somebody who's also mixing, so that they can make sure that the audio is going to sound good when it gets to that recorder. Even in editing, you still use that same scale. It looks something like this. This is from, I think, Premiere. And it shows how, it is from Premiere. And it shows where the audio levels are hitting. So that's after you've recorded it, you get it into the editing suite and you're starting to edit it. You can see where the sound hits. And once it starts turning yellow, you can see this one right here. There's a bit starting to turn a bit yellow, because it's starting to get up to that point. And it's just telling you, hey, be safe. You're almost at that level of where it could be clipping. So anywhere in the green is good. You just don't want to be too far down in the green, or it'll be way too quiet, like we were talking about earlier. And then, boosting it in post. I've done that a lot with my things, and it's just really annoying, and it doesn't work as well. One of the main things that I learned that I was doing incorrect was the peak volume thing. So peak volume is just where that's the loudest it gets during that clip. And you never want that to hit 0 or go over, but you want the whole levels to be around that -12 to -10 area. I thought when I used to record, I thought you wanted the peak to get at -12 to -10. And so then my actual levels would be down in like -24 or -24. And then I'd have to boost it up in post-production a lot, because it was always quiet. And I didn't really learn that until recently, that you just want the levels to stay around 12 to 10, -12 to 10, and then to not go over 0. As long as they don't go over 0 and they stay at -12, -10, it's going to sound good. It's going to be loud enough. It's going to be it's going to be a lot easier to work with if you want to boost it in post and stuff like that.
Also, there usually a lot of the audio recorders have visual color change when it's speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when you're kind of doing the field audio, it's you need to pay attention to that audio recorder as to what it's telling you. And then if it's speaking, then kind of
Right.
adjust
If you're
accordingly.
talking regularly and it's getting really like yellow or starting to even dip into the red, you definitely
Right.
want to bring it down. And you want to make sure, somebody was saying that if you're doing like an interview or if you're doing like, one of those scenes like we were talking about where the person's going to get louder, you want to be sure you know where their regular range is. So you can set the levels, but you also want to be sure where their range is going to be when they get louder so that you know where to adjust and when. And
Right,
then
like,
that's-
especially if you're one man, or if you're doing the audio recording, and then you usually don't have time to, you're focusing on the actors. You don't have time to basically look at your bar all the time.
Right.
But you can quickly, visually you can look at the light, and then you can either pull your boom. Lav you can't do much, but with the boom, you can either lift it up or bring it down, based on what levels you want to record it. Because you're hearing that, and all of a sudden the volume is kind of higher, or the signal is louder.
Right, and it starts
that is
clipping,
definitely
and you want to be aware of it. And
right.
yeah, and that's the other thing. You can also bring a mic a little bit farther away. You don't want to bring it too far away, especially depending on what you have, because certain mics are only good at a certain range. Lower budget shotgun mics, you have to make sure that they're in the right range of where they pick up best, but especially not going off axis like we were learning the other last week.
Right, you raise a important point, because what happens if when you mentioned about the logarithmic scale, right? So the logarithmic scale is going to give you a performance of either the whatever equipment you're using, whether it's a mic or a mixer or an audio recorder, right?
Right.
So to know exactly which, so a lot of different recorders, more sophisticated recorders have better refined resolution than a cheap recorder, right? I mean, because price differential. And knowing that curve kind of helps you, like a safeguard yourself to operate within that range. And once you operate within that range, you're basically looking at the sweet spot of the audio signal in the car. So knowing your equipment is kind of as it was talked about before. I think knowing your equipment is kind of critical to doing sound, because you know exactly where you want to fall in that logarithmic curve, because logarithmic curve is like a compressed,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, like
it's a
even using like he's saying, like even depending on what equipment you have, even the mic you use with a certain recorder will sound different than using a different mic with that same recorder, and vice versa. So each
Right.
piece of equipment kind of affects how it sounds and how loud it comes out,
Yeah.
which is why you want to be, that's why you want to practice with your equipment before you try to use it, because
Right.
you understand it.
Especially that the bathtub curve they have, right? It's logarithmic scale. It's drawn on logarithmic scale, and basically gives different frequencies in which that curve is appearing. So
Yeah.
you know which frequency your subject is, then you exactly operate around that frequency for the mixer or the audio. Then you're in good, you're in good space. So knowing that curve beforehand kind of is sometimes very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And then even like we were learning, I think last week, it was about the different mics have the different pickup. What is it called? Pickup response. So it'll pick up different frequencies at different levels. It might pick up lower frequencies like room tone at a lower level than it will voice, because it's trying to focus on voice and getting that good, crisp, clear voice vocals. So knowing your mic beforehand, looking into it like that will also help, so that like he's saying, like that. And then when you go into adjusting it with the decibels and everything and the gain, you can understand how it's going to affect that line, that pickup line.
And it's always a good idea to test it out, test the flow, record, and then bring it into Pro Tools or whatever, or Final Cut or Adobe Premiere, and see what the levels are before you actually go and shoot. That's kind of solves a lot of the problems because
Yeah.
you kind of helps out.
Yeah. So if you're renting the equipment, they always let you test it out beforehand to kind of get a sense of if you want that one or if you want something else or if you like it or if it's messed up. So always test out the equipment, always look into it if you can, if you have time, guys. Always, research your stuff before you get it because not everything's going to work the same or sound the same. So for post-production audio, if you're trying to get into festivals or if you're trying to get a distributor like Netflix or Amazon, you're going to want to follow their guidelines for what they set because some are really strict where the levels need to be or even where sounds within those levels need to be. And that's how you can, that's the, what is it called? Distributing sound, the audio export levels. That's what I'm saying. So that's how you'll know where to set your levels so that nothing is going above or below what they put inside their requirements. So you have to look that up. Most of them have it on their website or something like that, where you can see what levels you'll need to get it approved by them for them to allow it on their platform. So before you even get to them, you have it all set up exactly how they require it. Now for post-production to the web, it is up to you to decide. It's kind of like somebody said, it's like the Wild West because it's just like you can do whatever you want. As long as you don't get it over 0, even in editing, you don't want it to get over 0 because of the same thing. The decibels at 0, it's going to make it distort and sound ugly. So as long as it's not going over that mark or hitting that mark, you should be good with your post-production sound if you're just putting it on the web, like a YouTube video or something like that, and you're not trying to submit it to some company that you need to have their special requirements. One of the persons said that when they're editing their videos, their YouTube videos, they try to get their sound as close to 0 without hitting it or going over as possible. They'll put it around like -1 or 2. That way it's as loud as it can be for anyone who's using whatever device. If they're using a phone and it doesn't have as good of speakers as a TV's speakers or something like that, they can still hear it well because nothing's more annoying to somebody trying to watch a video than turning up their audio as much as they can and they still can't hear it. So that's why you want to make sure the levels are high. 0, you might not want it to be exactly like that guy. That was his opinion. Somebody else said they put it around -3 or 4. So it really depends on what you want, what you think sounds good. But when you're exporting and you're finished with your video, if you don't have anything that you're trying to get it submitted to, and you're just trying to put it online somewhere or keep it for yourself, keeping it around as loud as you can get it without it clipping is usually a good thing because then you can always turn your sound down on your device. If it's too loud for you, then it's a lot easier to do that than it is to try to turn it up completely from if it's too quiet. I already said that one. Let me see. So let's see. So this thing was saying this is Premium Beat. They sell like different mics and stuff like that, and give a lot of tutorials. Some of that stuff is in our syllabus. They said for safety, no peaks should be above -6. Most video editors agree that the overall audio level of the audio mix should normalize between -10 to -20 decibels. They personally set their levels between -12 and -8. And they say, the trick, of course, is to stay away from 0. So it goes into a lot of preference, and it depends on what you're doing. When you're doing your audio mix, you usually want your dialogue to be standing apart from the rest of your audio. So you'll probably set your other audio, like your sound effects and your music, at a lower level, depending on the scene. Sometimes you might want your sound effects or your music to be louder than the dialogue, but generally speaking, you want what's being spoken to be heard, and that's when you want that to be at a higher decibel level than the sound effects and the music and stuff like that. But the whole thing altogether from what they're saying, the whole thing altogether, they usually normalize it between -10 and -20 for the entire audio file. So it doesn't go below that. It doesn't go, well, it does go over it. It says normalize. So it's like, the most of the audio falls within those ranges. But anything really loud will go, of course, should go over -10 and get up to like -5, 6 or whatever without going over, because then it starts to possibly get into a clipping range. So there's the Zoom F6 that has the, you see the decibel levels right here, and you can see that it starts to get red, it starts to get yellow, and then it gets orange above 6, and then it gets red when it gets near or at 0. So that's more of the way most recorders show you is they show you on this color scale, so that you see it being green, yellow, orange, and red. So once it starts getting yellow, you're kind of close to hitting that clipping mark, but you still have some room. Once you get orange on this specific one, once you get orange, you have very little room to work with before it starts clipping. And then red would be it clipping and being and ruining the audio. So this was from the website. They were saying always set your recording level based on the meter levels and not arbitrary numbers on a dial or record level switch. Just meaning pay attention to these lines. Don't worry if you put the gain to 3 or 2 or 1 or whatever you're putting the gain to, boosting the signal. Just worry about where it's hitting so that it's not going over 0 and it's not going too far down to be too quiet. Never exceed its peak level of 0. Everybody's saying that, of course, because that's going to be hideous. Get your speaker to talk naturally and then set your recording level. You want to know kind of where they're going to talk for the most part. That's where you do a kind of a sound test and you see where they are normally speaking at. And people, when they talk, we always go up and down with our voice. That's why those sound waves look very different. Some parts are skinny, some parts are long, because they're getting louder and quieter with each what am I trying to say? With each part of each word that we're saying is getting louder and quieter. Even I might say my L's a little louder than I say my O's or my D's or whatever, or something like that. So getting them to talk normal and seeing where the audio is going to fall when they're talking at a normal level, how they usually talk, is the best way to start out. And then you just want to kind of monitor it and keep track of if they start getting louder or quieter. You adjust it at that point. Some people will be a little nervous when they first start. So if you're starting something like, an interview scene in a movie or whatever, or news reporting scene, and they're a little nervous, they'll probably be a little more quiet, a little more conserved. So you want to be aware of that so that you're not just keeping your audio at the same level. Like Fish was saying, you need to make sure that if they do start getting more comfortable, they start getting louder, you see that on your monitor and you're going, oh, I need to turn down the gain a little bit to make sure that the level stays the same. Since they're getting more comfortable, they're naturally speaking a little louder. So most people say dialogue. Like I've seen this a few different places. They're all saying -12 to -8. Most people say -12 to -10, but a few people are saying -8. Somewhere within that range for the normal amount of talking will give you enough free space to, when they do get louder, you don't have to get over 0. If you're recording music on a digital recorder, not analog, digital. If you're recording music digitally with the digital audio, then you should set your level from -22 to -18 because those instruments can get really loud in certain spots and you don't want them to peak over 0, just like with everything else. Mix level should have a range from -14 to -10, and sound effects can vary from -20 to -10 depending on what the sound effect is, but they shouldn't be so loud that they take over the entire scene most of the time. Here's like usually on an editing system, you'll have the sound be somewhere around so you can see it while you're playing the video. This one's on the right. So you'll see the levels go up and down over here, and that's when you can adjust it in post-production to bring it to whatever level you desire. Okay, this one's saying when this is a tip that they're saying is when there's dialogue in the scene, you want to keep it around -12, like everyone else is saying, somewhere around that area. But if you have music or something in the background, usually you want to try to keep it at least like -3 to -9 below the dialogue. So, you want to set your levels differently to make sure that it's, that you can still hear what's being said without the music overtaking it. You see a lot of people complaining about Christopher Nolan because he will put his sound effects and his music over the top of some dialogue and can barely understand what the people are saying because he wants to emphasize the sound effects and music in his film or in that scene. And that's just his choice. Most people don't really like it, but like it's his artistic choice.
It is an artistic choice, and it's been done before him, and it's something he chooses to do, and it's more stylistic or whatever. But it's a very oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And I was just gonna say it's a very niche style that not many directors choose. Some older ones did it a little bit, but honestly, sometimes I'm just joking around with Coda, like he's just pretentious. He just wants to do it so he can. Well, it's a style. Well, but to be fair, on his part, they do say that he makes it for a specific cinema room, like for a specific kind of cinema sound system, blah blah blah. The thing is, not everyone has that in their homes, so his choice.
That's why like things like Netflix will usually give you those requirements because even if it's going to sound the best it's ever sounded on the most professional equipment that you can get, not everyone's going to have that most professional sound equipment, so they're not going to be able to hear it the way that it was heard on that specific equipment, which is why they give you those requirements and stuff so that you can match it to what they want so that it can be most widely accepted on different people's TVs and stuff, because those lower end sound, like if they don't have any kind of stereo speakers or anything and they're just getting it from their TV, it's going to sound a lot different. It's not going to sound as good. It's going to be a little more, because the device that's outputting the sound is different. So they give you those requirements so that that sound will match and sound good on most people's equipment. And that's why, like Priscilla's saying, with Christopher Nolan, he likes to make his sound very specific. He said it's because he likes to put it in like, IMAX theaters that have some of the best sound outputting devices that you can get. And then it'll sound good on those. But when you get it into other less high budget theaters and things like that, they don't have that as good of sound devices as IMAX and things like that. So it sounds a little worse.
You want to say something, Vish? Vish?
Yeah, I think the movie that I was trying to think of was Boogie Nights. That there was like a lot of sound related. I don't know who the director was for that. But,
Which one?
Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights.
That's it.
No, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Pretty old. I think slightly.
It's an older movie, honey.
Yeah.
No wonder. I don't know.
But,
But it does that sound design where the sound effects and music are louder.
yeah, there's a lot of confrontation and there's a lot of music in the background. So it's like two young, working men, basically, they drag their life around.
But that's the thing, though. It's a confrontational scene. It's not a scene where they're explaining exposition and they're explaining what you need to know. And it's still like, what? Now, he claims, in all his Christopher Nolan mightiness, that it is because to psychologically, and it's kind of interesting, if that's really what it is, it's kind of interesting. He says it's an artistic way of showing the viewer that maybe this information doesn't really matter. Maybe you should be paying attention to something else, or like the things that don't really matter as much. There was some video essay that talked about it a lot better than I can explain it. But even with that, I was still like, maybe your execution then, dude, because like it's not working for me.
I don't know, like I said, it's an artistic choice. He chooses to do it that way. Some people like it, some people
Right.
don't. I mean, it's just, yeah.
No, definitely.
I
still
would
respect the guy.
I would recommend not following that, especially not for most projects. But you know, if that's something you want to imitate and do, then you know, of course, go ahead.
I still respect the
Nolan.
fact that he is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Christopher Nolan is a seasoned director, so I mean, we can probably take some from him, but not really.
No, definitely. I'm saying, like,
So,
I still respect the fact that he is willing to, you know what, this
yeah.
is my artistic choice, this is my decision. Like, not everyone's gonna like it, but that
Right.
just shows like how committed he is
Yeah.
to his art and to what he believes in.
Right.
And I admire that. I may not agree with it 100%. I may not think it's always necessary. Maybe his execution, in my opinion, like for me, is lacking, but that doesn't mean that he's not really talented or he's not crazy hardworking, or like he's still incredible and I can still give him merit.
All right.
What do they say? Like you were mentioning, you need to know the rules before you break it, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
He definitely knows them.
All right. So to wrap this, well, I still have a few things I was going to go over about the features that you can do to kind of prevent some things, but just to kind of give a little bit of an overview. This guy did it really well. We even sent his video out. In production, when recording, you don't want to peak over 0 decibels or higher. And you want to keep your audio probably around -10 to -12 decibels on your recorders. And that way, if it peaks and goes higher to like -7, it's still good. It's not going to make it distort and sound ugly. In post-production, you want to follow the guidelines of whatever you're trying to submit to, if it's a festival or if it's Netflix or Amazon or a company or a distributor or something. They're going to have their own guidelines and they're going to have specific requirements that it needs to meet. And you'll have to find a way to meet those or hire someone to help you meet those guidelines if you want to try to submit to them. He tries to get it as close to 0 decibels for web videos. That way, whatever device the people have, they can still hear his audio and they can just turn it down if it's too loud for them, but instead of it being too quiet. And they can't, they turned up their audio as loud as they can and they still can't hear it, then they're not going to watch the video. So that's why he does that. And other people have said -3, they've said like -4. So it is, you do want to kind of raise it up, get it as loud as you can without it clipping in post-production, I believe. And once you're done and you export it, it'll still sound good. It won't clip and it won't sound distorted, but it'll still be loud enough for whatever device somebody's going to play it on. Now, when you're using a recorder and you're using mics and things, there are some features that these things have so that you can keep that level, that, the general level of the audio between -10 and -12 decibels. There's what's called a limiter. I know I have this on my Zoom. A lot of recorders come with it. Limiter they're on cameras and they're on audio devices, and they will limit the sound gain so that it isn't as loud. But if you're using too much of it, it can squash the audio and make it sound worse. All right, so it depends on how much.
Thank you. Sorry, I got kicked out.
Yeah, you accidentally got kicked out or something. It depends on how much you're doing, but a limiter will make it where if you are doing that one-man band and you don't have a sound person, and you know that this scene that you're shooting is going to get louder, you can set this limiter so that it doesn't allow the sound to get over a certain decibel limit. That way it doesn't ever clip and sound ugly, but it might sound a little, it won't sound as good as if somebody's there monitoring it and, you know, constantly working on it. But it is an option if you have no other choice. And some people use it just because they can always boost it in post-production. So they limit it just to make sure it never hits that mark. And it usually sounds really good. It just, you know, like with any of these audio settings I've seen, like the more you use them, usually the worse the sound gets. So you want to be very careful with how much you're using of a limiter or how much you're using of these other features, because the sound will start to distort or just sound unnatural and weird because you're doing all these things to it that are, you know, they're not natural, they're artificial. So you don't want to use it too much, just like with any other artificial thing. You want to try to like make it sound as real as possible. So be careful with it, listen to it as you're adjusting it and make sure that it still sounds good before you stick to it. But it is there if you need it. Also, there's adjusting the gain down. A lot of sound recorders have those knobs on them, or if you have somebody doing a mixer, then those are going to have the knobs for you so you can adjust it before it gets to the recorder. And that's going to adjust the gain down so that it can have the same effect as a limiter, but it's not always possible, of course, if you are, like I said, working alone and you don't have somebody on audio. I already said always do a test beforehand. There's also a thing called a low cut feature, which will cut out the low frequencies to reduce things like room tone. If you have, you know, if you can't turn off that fridge and you're shooting in the kitchen, using a feature that's called low cut will try to reduce those low frequencies. But be sure to test it beforehand, like with everything else. Test it, to make sure that it's not cutting out too much of the lower end of audio, because you might, if you do it too much, you'll start cutting out the lower ends of the person's speech, and then it'll sound unnatural and weird. So as with everything else, just be careful with how much you're doing. But that's also there so that you can limit the room tone and those ambient noises that you don't want if you can't get rid of them. There's another thing, if you have a multi-track recorder like this, you can do what's called split level recording. And that's when you're using the multi-track recorder, you're recording with one mic, but you're sending it to 2 different tracks. That way you can have one have more gain, one have less. And then you can just mix those, you know, cut out different parts and splice them together in editing. If the person starts yelling and getting louder, like we're saying, you'll have that one track of audio where it's a lot lower, so that when they do yell, it just becomes around the same level as when they're talking. And that way it doesn't cut out. And then you can just combine those and then make it louder at that part where they're screaming, and it won't be cut out and it'll sound great. So that's something else to think about when you have a multi-track. You don't have to just use it for one individual track. You can do 2 tracks for one source of audio, like one mic. Then someone else said when editing, you want the input audio to peak between -12 and -6. So just keep that in mind. The input audio should be around that while you're editing. For the output level, when you're, you know, finishing the final mix and everything, you want the output level, he said, to be around, he puts it around -3 decibels. And that keeps it really loud, like we were saying, without going over and getting clipped and sounding ugly. Those are all the notes I have. This was one of the like hardest things I had that I was trying to wrap my head around, just because there's so much information on it. And it was one of the hardest things for me to like understand fully, but I've been, you know, I'm glad I finally kind of have a better wrap of my, I mean, you know what I'm saying? I'm wrapping my head around it better now.
That's good. That helps.
Humbling. All
I
right.
appreciate the classes. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no problem. So guys, that was it. Does anyone have any questions or comments for decibels and sound? All right, well, there's one thing I wanted to mention. So now that we know about decibels and sound levels, you know, keep your audio around -10 and -12 decibels while you're recording. I'm sure if you're trying to record with a phone, they have apps or something that can do this, that can show you and monitor the audio, if that's all you have. But we're going to start our clean audio exercise. You can start it now, and then we're actually changing the meeting from October 11th to October 12th on a Tuesday, but that's when it's going to be due. So we'll keep mentioning that.
What's
But
gonna
yeah,
be
we're going to change the one from Monday, October 11th to Tuesday, October 12th.
Okay,
Because
and
something came up and we're going to be busy on Monday that week.
no, that's fine. Which projects do? It's the
So this project will be, everyone record 15 to 30-second long video clip. And don't worry about how the video looks and all that. Focus on the audio. Try to get as good of audio as you can. Try to have somebody that's going from quiet, maybe whispering, getting louder and louder up to yelling. And meanwhile, trying to keep it, within those levels, that -12 to -10, or having it peak around -6 or something, so that it doesn't go over to 0. All you're trying to do in this exercise is make sure that the audio doesn't get to 0 decibels and then it starts cutting off. You don't want the audio to cut off. So you want to be able to set it. You can either use, if you have a mic and you have a recorder, use that and go into the settings and try to see if maybe a limiter will help, or whatever will help you get that audio right. If you have another person, try to see if someone will help you adjust the audio and boost or lower the gain as you're doing it. If all you have is a phone, I would look up apps or something like that and try to see if you can have some kind of audio adjustment app. And then of course, if you have a friend that can help you do that as well, it's always good to have somebody else while whoever's in frame is whispering and yelling. But that's what we're going to use. And we're going to use that video clip for a few more exercises in the future, where we're going to take that sound out and then start inputting different sounds. And when we learn about post-production and audio, dialogue replacement, and all of those things, we're going to use that video clip for it. So just keep that in mind. You can be as creative as you want, but the main focus of this is just to get good audio in different ranges. You can do MOV format or MP3, it doesn't matter, but I would use MOV if you have that available, V. The other thing I wanted to mention last is just what we're studying on Thursday. So we're going to do the last bit of the lighting equipment. This one's going to be more focused on all the different kinds of lights and light bulbs there are. And so we'll see the difference in all of these things. We're talking about tungsten lights and we're talking about Fresnels, and what we want to know what those mean, what they are. A lot of people are starting to say that they're going to LED lights because they can do a lot, but we'll see why, we'll see the pros and cons of all this stuff. And then room tone, like we were talking about today, we'll look into that a little more and discuss it more on Thursday. And then wireless versus wired audio. I believe Arden brought that up and I added it to the syllabus. We're going to be going over that as well. So those are the things we're going to be going over Thursday's meeting.
sounds great.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
And I'm going to stop it there as we got to go.